Welcome back, this is Antman2050, and although what we have playing here is Samurai Warlords 4, what I'd really like to talk about is Dynasty Warriors 9. I know I'm a little bit behind the times, because this video will actually be coming out on the day it's released, and so either if you're watching it that day, or you're watching it on Valentine's, happy holiday, by the way. But there's a lot of things I want to talk about. Some of them are going to be great, and some of them are going to be not so great, but let's go ahead and get started. One of the big things is a really large change to how Dynasty Warriors is going to be played. So instead of having the individual characters having their own stories and just a single battle, we're actually going to enter into an open world environment. The open world will be divided throughout your game by eras. These different eras are going to envelop the whole of China, as it was historically important to the conflict. As we go, each era should change China in a unique way. The possibilities for storytelling in this is enormous, because you're going to be able to get a better understanding of each of these conflicts than we've ever had before. And it should actually shine a lot more light on people who want to know more about the Yellow Turban Rebellion, or the coalition against Danzhou, or just the War of the Three Kingdoms going into Jin. We have the possibility of playing out a lot more of these battles in a unique way. So, what could be the downside? One of the downsides to opening the world like this is you're also opening the world to a lot of retread. As you go each era, yeah, there'll be things that changed, but is it going to be enough for it to really feel like these really smart levels that Dynasty has done in the past? And the answer is we won't know until it's out. The other end is, even though these worlds seem to be packed with things to do and different types of quests, we don't really know how well that's going to go. If we're going to be rushing through a wilderness with, just a couple little things to pick up, or if it's really going to be filled with things that make you want to go out and do them. So it's a big risk, and it's a big change, and it's going to change the way that we all play Dynasty Warriors. I think it's going to be excellent. I am worried about the retread, though. So, next thing that we want to talk about is going to be cloned weapons. Now, this has been a big deal leading up to the release of the game. We know that there's more than a handful of clones. And I know clones is kind of a dirty word, because we're all worried about Dynasty 6 again, which was, for me, probably their biggest low point. However, these clones do look like they have enough of a variation in how they fight to make them feel at least unique enough to play with. I'm really hoping that that's going to be the case. In the end, we really won't know how the clone system is going to affect the game until we're completely out. The downside is they are going with the idea of every character being able to use every weapon. And although that seems like kind of a neat idea, it does ultimately make it so that not everybody is unique. Not everybody has kind of their own feel or their own unique weapons that they're going to use. So, I don't know. And the idea of weapons cloning, I'm apprehensive, but I'm less apprehensive than I was when I was first hearing about it. Because now we've gotten to see a good deal of the characters, if not all of the characters, and how their unique battle system is going to work. Things that we should be kind of keeping in mind, though, with these cloned weapons, a lot of that, I think, is less about Koei being lazy and more about just as they were building this game, how much time they were spending on their open world environment, and how many characters they felt that they could get away with the extra programming for. So I think that that's a good point to jump over to DLC stuff. Now, this is going to be the first Dynasty Warrior with a season pass, which is kind of an interesting idea. So we of course won't know a whole lot about that until they start announcing anything. But in the season pass, they're talking about new weapons. They're talking about new scenarios. Sorry about that. Brain froze for a second. I'm really hoping that as they've gone, there was weapons that they just didn't have time to build out, like Sansei's, Tonfa's, and Zhang Hei's claws in a more realistic fashion. And that these are some of the things that we can actually expect to see showing up in the DLC stuff. So I'm kind of hoping some of these characters that have become a little less unique will have those weapons return. Now, things like Madai's paintbrush, I kind of think we're not going to be seeing those again. But we'll see. I mean, never say never, I guess. I mean, it seems like a crazy idea to have a paintbrush weapon to start with, so... But yeah, the DLC stuff, I kind of also expect to see some of these NPCs possibly becoming playable characters. While we're talking about that, let's talk about NPCs for a moment. Samurai here actually did a pretty good job of... Whoa. Sorry about that. Of making its non-named generals have a unique look. So that way you felt like you were always facing off against somebody who was more important than just a kind of no-name character. And it looks like that's kind of what they're doing with the new Dynasty as well. But we're getting a lot of characters that maybe don't have as great historic significance as unique NPCs. We're going to have at least 4 of them starting off with the Donjo's granddaughter, kind of the predecessor to Lu Bu, Yan Shu, and a few others. I think this is a brilliant way to do it, and you can kind of measure people's interest in what these characters are going to be like, or whether people are going to actually want to use them by their reception before you make them actual fighter characters. Sorry, guys. My English there for a second. So I think this is actually a fantastic idea. I'd really like to see them continue to build on it. Hopefully we'll get to see that in the DLC, because I really think most of the characters that they threw out for their first wave of NPCs are super unique. And they're characters I think a lot of us would like to have actually seen as regular playable characters in the roster. So I just think it's a great idea, and I'm hoping that they're going to continue to expand on it. And if that's what they're going to use for their DLCs to make these characters that we have as just NPCs in this game be regular usable characters, I think that'd be a great idea. Along with that, DLC could be an interesting answer to the Extreme and Dynasty, Empire versions of these games that come out. Because Dynasty typically will have a couple of different games that inherit the same time with their Dynasty and Extreme versions. And I don't know, as much as big of a fan as I am, I typically won't pick up both. But with the Season Pass, you can actually really set up the extra content that you were going to put in those as a part of your season paths, which could be really neat. We could also get a whole lot of fully realized new characters from that, or just updated storylines. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I'm hoping it's going to be more than some fancy costumes, but that's always a possibility as well. Speaking of fancy costumes, we have another thing that we need to talk a little bit about, which is the informal garb. I'm actually really excited to see this, although I don't know how it's going to really fall into this into the gameplay mechanics. It sounds like informal garb is mostly used in a new feature in the game called hideaways. The hideaways are going to be basically where your soldiers kind of relax between battles. And you're going to be able to build out and decorate from them and be able to do certain things that you would be able to do in towns in these. Along with that, presumably, you will be able to visit your soldiers or your generals, and they'll be able to kind of visit you. There's going to be some kind of a relationship mechanic, although I don't know how that's going to play into the overall game. I don't think we'll know until it's completely out. But they made the informal clothes so that we don't have our soldiers showing up in full armor just in the middle of town or at our hideouts. And I think it's a dynamite idea, and it's a really neat way to see them in a less formal garb. Which I know sounds redundant from what I'm just saying, but I think fans would probably know what I mean. Because, I mean, it was always cool to go into a city and see our generals hanging out. And some characters it makes perfect sense, like Zhongfei. I almost don't ever expect to see him out of armor. Guan Yu's gear always seemed like it fit anywhere. But then you get like to Cao Ren, or Cao Ren, and he's like a tank. And it just seems so odd to see him hanging about in his full armor all the time. And so it'd be kind of neat to see how they're going to do that through the game. And what that's going to mean for our moving forward here anyways. Let's take a second and talk about these endings, because I mean it's one of the big... It's definitely a big selling point that all 90 characters is going to have their own unique endings. And I'm excited for it, and I look forward to battling my way through China with all 90 heroes. It is definitely something that's going to keep me busy, and hopefully it won't drive everybody on the channel crazy that my Dynasty Warrior needs are going to be kind of all-consuming for a little bit. But let's swap over here. Anyways, but you have to remember that in Dynasties 2, 3, and I think even 4, you could consider those unique endings, even though it was just different people dancing around the fire. So technically, those were all unique endings, because they changed based on what characters you had saved in that journey, what characters were important to your particular army and whatnot. But they were really the same ending. It was just who was dancing around the bonfire. That really does kind of scare me. Because technically, those are unique endings. There's nothing about them that isn't. At the exact same time, however, are they very satisfying unique endings? No, they're not. And I want people to kind of realize that this is a very real possibility that this could be what we're going to see in Dynasty 9. That we're going to encounter kind of real half-done endings. So I guess don't get too excited yet, because those endings could be very lackluster. But at the same time, I can't say I'm not hyped for it, so I guess we ultimately will know very, very soon what these endings will entail. So there was a thread that I was talking to another gamer not too long ago about, and it was dealing with some of the next generation of soldiers and how it's kind of difficult to see them when they seem to be too young to have children. One of the ones that's very obvious is with Zhang Fei's wife, where she looks actually younger than both her children, and Zhang Fei, of course, looks much older than he should be to be with her, and she will ultimately be outliving him. So it's kind of odd. It's a little bit creepy, I guess, in her case, because she seems very childish compared to her children, who seem very mature. There's some characters that I would love to see the next generation of. Like, I'd love to see, and I know I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but Shu Lu's, I'd love to see his children play out in the game. I'd love to see more of the end with Shu and Wei. We get a pretty good idea of the second generation or third generation with with Wei, but Wu, not so much. And so it would be really neat to see how that works out. The downside is, because they made some of those characters look very young, it would be kind of odd or kind of creepy to see them not age. Now, some people have theorized that, like the Spirit of Sonata game, we will be seeing aging in Dynasty 9. Most of what they're using that based on is Liu Bei's mustache. Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. There's some scenes where he has it and some scenes where he doesn't. For me, I'm thinking this is more like Zhao Hadun's eye patch, where it's just going to be a different costume to show a relevant amount of time for Liu Bei, rather than it being an actual aging mechanic for him. However, it would be kind of a neat thing to see. I don't think we're going to see it this time, but what do you guys think about this? Is this something that they should implement? It seems like a really neat feature for the for the Sonata game. Gosh, now I'm blanking on the name. That's the downside with doing gameplay and commentary sometimes, Getting the names out is kind of a pain. Alright, and so I guess the Spirit of the Sonata, dang it, there it is. That's what I was looking for. Is that something that we should start wanting in Dynasty? I guess we really will have to see how the open world affects the whole nature of the game. But I would kind of like to see it. I think it would be really neat to see these characters as they age up. It would be really neat to see a more mature Zhao Yun by the time we get to Lu Xun's part of the story, But it's one of those things we'll just have to see once the game comes out, and it'll be here soon. So, I guess the last point I would really like to talk about is going to be the new combo system. So we're moving from the charge system to the status system, or the state system. I guess I'm in the minority in that I've never had any problem with the charge system. I actually think it's a fantastic system. I've never really wanted Dynasty Warriors to get any more complicated. Now, granted, if you are a Koei player or a Muso player, then looking at Samurai here, it's a lot different. Samurai and Dynasty both have unique combos that or unique systems that mirror each other, but are a bit different. And I've loved that they've kept them different. It truly makes each game feel incredibly unique to itself. And I think by taking that away, you really do take away some of the flavor of what the game is. For me, the big advantage of Dynasty has always been the ease of use. People that don't really play a lot of games have never had a problem with me sitting down with Dynasty Warriors and picking up their combos super easy. Getting used to how a character performs their attacks, and falling in love with a particular character, who has, for the most part, a unique style of play and unique movesets to them. The status system, although we won't know until the game's completely out because we haven't got our hands on it, looks like a more complicated and yet more dumbed down system at the same time. So, for those who don't know, the charge system was based on a series of hitting box and then following it up with a triangle for a more powerful attack. And basically, the more boxes that you did, the harder the triangle attack. So it's not necessarily the toughest setup. For the state system that they're working on now, it appears that it's going to be still boxes doing your majority of your damage, while triangle will do a kind of harder attack to kind of break guards, but you're going to augment it by pressing one of the triggers, which will give you either it'll give you a handful of different attacks depending on which button you push. So, for instance, if you press triangle, you'll get a pop-up, where you'll get to follow them in the air with boxes. If you press X, you will get a down hit, which will hit people on the ground or bounce them off the ground. Once again, you can follow it up with triangle, or box, I'm sorry. Box is going to do probably like a crowd control, and O is going to do a more specialized overhand attack or a block break attack. And this is how your combos are going to work. You're going to be delivering different status effects to your enemy based on both your performance in play and what your enemy, in theory, is stronger or weaker to. So it's a unique new change, but I mean the real big change is it seems that is one of the triggers gets involved. And I think that this is not going to provide as much of a change-up as fans that maybe were not as happy with Dynasty in the past believe it will. I don't feel like if you're playing this, you're going to feel a whole lot different than you normally would for Dynasty. The downside is, the kind of comfortable combos that people were very easily taught kind of get changed up when you implement this new mechanic. So it could be just what Dynasty needs for fans to feel that it's fresh and bring in a whole new generation of players, and it could be a misstep that goes in the same vein as Dynasty 9, or Dynasty 6, I'm sorry. Either way, if you're excited about it, why don't you hit me up in the comments? Let's talk about these things. I'm excited about Dynasty 9. By this point, if you are a Dynasty fan, you're probably already playing it. Let's just enjoy it together, and hopefully all the things that I'm worried about don't come to pass, and the things that we're excited for will blow our minds. The idea of an open world in China is amazing to me. Changing up the combo systems, I don't know. Either way, we will find out very soon. Till then, though, this is Antman2050, and we're playing Samurai 4, but we're really looking forward to Dynasty Warriors 9. Till then, have fun, play games, be aware. We'll see you all next time.